Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining. Brendan and I are super excited to share this topic with you guys and present. We really want to start out with actually thanking Trundle for putting this on and giving us the opportunity to speak. Brendan and I are very passionate about this tool. We really like it. It's helped out our companies tremendously, and getting the opportunity to share it with you guys and go through the session. So we're very excited. So thank you so much for joining us. I know you had a lot of other options. So with that, we will get started. So let me just move forward with introductions. So this is, my name is Erica Larson. My nickname is Milkshake, which we will get into. And if you attended Phil Fox's session earlier, you got teased with the story behind this. I am the co-leader of an Atlassian community in Idaho. One of the poll questions is, how do you pronounce the city? So I'm not going to give that away. And I have been a leader since 2019. I have been an admin in the Atlassian world since 2015. I started in server, then went to data center, and then migrated to cloud. And so I've kind of done the whole gambit of funness there. And just some further information about like what I do as far as quarterly planning and using advanced roadmaps, just a little bit more about my company. We've been using advanced roadmaps to plan our quarterly plan for about 2 years now. We were using Excel before that, and I know everybody just cringes with Excel. We have over 400 developers. We've got 40 plus teams, product managers, all sort of involved in this planning process. And we're divided a kind of worldwide, US, India, the UK. And so it's sort of just this worldwide planning event. And all of our teams are using sprints. And so that's something we just want to make sure that we call out, because as we dive into this, we'll kind of explain a little bit more about the helpfulness of sprints. And just a little bit more of a tease here about the Milkshake nickname. You got to stick around and hang out for the whole presentation, and I will share the story of the t-shirt. Oh yes, there it is. And the nickname at the end of the presentation. So I'm sorry, you have to stick around.
And hello, I'm Brendan Byers. I'm a co-leader for the Vancouver, British Columbia ACE. I've been an admin for Atlassian products since about 2016, used them for many years before that. Similar to Erica, we started out on server and then transitioned to cloud and do quarterly planning for the company that I work for, Absolute Software, which is a cybersecurity software company here in Vancouver. We have over 20 teams across 2 continents with more than 100 plus developers, with most of the teams using sprints. We've got a couple teams that are sort of Kanban curious, and that can put in some special wrinkles when you're using advanced roadmaps, if you've got the difference between the two.
All right, so just kind of a high-level agenda and what we're going to go over today. So we're not going to go into super great detail about the basics of using advanced roadmaps. We are really wanting to dive into much more how we actually use it and giving you guys some tips and advice. So we'll just kind of cover a little bit like what is advanced roadmaps. We'll talk about how to actually set up your plan within advanced roadmaps. We're going to talk about planning it, and then how do you display it for all of your stakeholders and the people who are looking at visualizations. Some general tips and things that we've learned, and just some other information. And then at the end, we do want to leave plenty of time for Q&A. So any specific questions that you guys have for your instances and the problems that you're seeking, please make sure and just throw those questions in the Q&A section, and we'll be sure to address those at the end. Okay, so what is advanced roadmaps? So you may know, if you've been around the ecosystem long enough, that it used to be called Portfolio. So you had Portfolio for Jira. It was an acquisition that Atlassian made and then has basically integrated into their system. And now it is called Advanced Roadmaps. It is something that is available specifically for Cloud Premium, Cloud Enterprise, and the data center instances. So if you're on server or if you're on Cloud Standard, this is a great reason to upgrade. I think it's a great tool and a great feature set. It's comparable to marketplace add-ons like Structure or Big Picture, so maybe upgrading isn't for you. And and you want to do some sort of add-on. Some of these tips may be relevant to those add-ons as well, but we're going to talk specifically about advanced roadmaps here. It's really useful when you're planning large projects across super many teams and like multiple releases, things like that. And so it's really great when you have just a big team to sort of plan out. And it gives you sort of this Gantt chart view, right? So you're used to your Scrum boards and your Kanban boards. This gives you just much more of that like Gantt chart view and some feature sets there. Okay, so now how do we set up our plan?
So the first step in creating any plan will be determining what exactly you want to bring in. Any plan that you set up will only display selected Jira issues that are brought in via boards, projects, or particular filters. Subsequently, you can exclude certain issues from displaying if they hit certain criteria, like if they've been completed for more than 30 days, or if there are certain issue types or statuses you want to avoid. But you want to keep that at least relatively concise. You've got a max issues of about 5,000. So going above, and if you're looking to go above and beyond that, you might be wanting to look at something more like Jira Align, which we won't be covering, but that's always an option out there for you. Usually it becomes too unfathomable at that size anyways. So some of the key pro tips that we recommend based off our own experience, sprint boards is the most useful way to import issues into your plan, because it also brings with it the various sprint information for your agile teams. If you've got a sprint board with a particularly long backlog that's causing bloat that you don't need extra stuff, you may want to build a specific sprint board that is only for like a quarter or a particular release, but just to sort of trim it down, but still get all that useful agile information. You need to keep in mind that the more issues you load in, the slower the load time, and you may run into some performance hiccups at high levels. So you want to keep it concise and manageable. And as I was mentioning, if you've got teams that are running Scrum versus some running Kanban, you may want to basically only one schema can be brought in at a time. So for those Kanban teams, you might want to create a Scrum board for them and just have one big sprint to sort of represent the work that they'll be doing over the course of a release.
So what fields should you use, right? So there's a lot of several built-in fields that come when you have advanced roadmaps. And these are the things that we really highly recommend, is using those system fields. Use team, use release or fixed version, parent, story points, time tracking, issue links. Use all of those system fields because they really power the back end of advanced roadmaps, and it's going to make it much easier to use and get the data that you want. We're going to dive into each of these ones a little bit more in detail throughout the presentation, so I won't go into detail right now on those, but that's something to really critically to remember there. The other thing to think about is what other custom fields do you want to bring in? So there is a couple of custom fields that we've built out. One is a multi-select team field. The team system field only allows you to select one team per issue, which sometimes doesn't make sense. Maybe you have something at that higher level that requires multiple teams' efforts, and you want to make sure that that's captured. So basically, we created a custom multi-select field that has all of the teams listed in it, and then they can kind of select all the teams that are needed. And then as you build out tasks or epics or whatever underneath that level, then you can assign those specific things to that specific team using the team field. Another thing that we use is we use RICE prioritization, which we'll dive into a little bit more as well later. I basically built out custom fields for doing the RICE score. So I've got 5 fields. They're mostly number fields. And then I have this automation on the back end that basically says, spit out the RICE score. And then you kind of have this number and this data point to basically help you do some prioritization work if your teams are maybe over capacity and you need to cut something, or you want to make sure you're working really on the highest priority items. So definitely something to think about. Avoid those unsupported fields. This is definitely a huge pro tip. Obviously, you're going to need description, right? Like those are some things you're just going to need. But as much as possible, if you're needing that data point to sort of make your plan, you're going to have to avoid anything that's multi-select or multi-line text field or paragraph field. Scripted fields, like if you're using sort of add-ons like Script Runner, those don't pull through. Assets don't pull through. If it's a date time field rather than just a date field, those things just won't pull through in the visualization of the advanced plan. You can still see them on the issues themselves and utilize them there, but you won't be able to see them in that like Gantt chart planning view. Make sure you're using the issue links correctly. So if it is something that is blocking something else, use is blocked by. Don't just use relates to. That's going to be really helpful with like the dependency map that advanced roadmaps have. So really making sure you're using those links correctly will really help you out. And then target start and target end are sort of the default fields for advanced roadmaps, but you really don't need to use those anymore. The way that they've really improved and iterated on the feature set, you can kind of use whatever custom date fields that make the most sense to you. Maybe you don't want to use custom date field, you want to use due date. You can pull those through now. So it's not necessarily you need to use that target end and target start. We use it at our company because they like the terminology of target rather than due or deadline. But that's kind of up to you and your company on what you want to do as far as those date fields to populate those Gantt charts.
One of the key fields, new custom fields that Advanced Roadmaps brings with it is the Teams field. As Erica mentioned, this allows you to assign an issue to a particular team and then define a team's velocity in either points or time. Once you set up a team in a single plan, you can set it to be shared across multiple plans. And the field is somewhat unique and isn't quite able to be displayed everywhere within Jira. You'll find certain places in dashboards and things like that where it doesn't quite display. In JQL queries, your team name renders to an ID number, which can make for some confusing JQL filters if people are looking at things and not quite clear as to what your which team you're referring to based on the number. Atlassian is in the process of rolling out a feature where the teams in advanced roadmaps gets linked to the teams in cloud, and exactly how that all sort of rolls out is very much in motion. I haven't had much chance to play with that just yet, but we're hoping it improves things for sure. The only one team per issue can cause some reporting challenges. Advanced roadmaps will show you everything that is all the teams that are being rolled up. So if you have an epic and you have a number of stories underneath that, and with each story pointing to a different team, it'll tell you in the epic that all these teams are involved, but it won't actually have multiple values. So that's another something that I think is a commonly requested improvement that Atlassian is working towards. So we highly recommend you use shared teams. It makes life much easier when you're creating a plan, multiple plans, because you're usually dealing with the same teams. And you should try to somewhat standardize your formula for sprint velocity. I know different teams will have different sprint velocities, but it does help, particularly if you're moving issues between teams, to have some sort of shared understanding so that they aren't way off. We use like a Fibonacci series that seems to work pretty well for us.
So now let's talk about issue hierarchy. So one of the best benefits, in my humble opinion, is the problem of having an epic of epics, right? I know that was something that like for a long time, everybody was like, oh, like I want to have an epic of epics. I just need that extra layer. And that's really what advanced roadmaps gives you, which is awesome. So it basically lets you have an unlimited level of like layers above the epic. So you can kind of have this way to sort of build out and have more information than just the 3 levels that Jira comes with standard. So one of the things that I recommend is like think through before you actually add a bunch of layers what makes the most sense. So in the screenshots, you can kind of see the one screenshot is the kind of the standard initiative terminology that Atlassian uses in a lot of their demos of saying like, hey, epics roll up to an initiative. But if you're using like the OKR format, maybe that makes more sense for you. So you're going to have your epics roll up to a key result, which rolls up to an objective and a company goal. And so you can kind of build out these layers that make the most sense for your company and what problem you're trying to solve. And if you're not wanting to do something heavy like Jira Align, this sort of gives you a little bit of that OKR ability. Now, be really cautious in adding extra layers. Every extra layer that you add is extra maintenance. Now you have to maintain another issue and another, fields and workflows. Automation can do some for you, but when I first rolled it out at my company, we had 3 levels above an epic, and it was pretty quick. And we were like, nope, this is too much. Like everything was out of date and the hygiene was terrible. And so we quickly rolled it back to just having 1 level, and that's where we've kind of stayed for now. And it's given us enough information using custom fields and things like that. So definitely gives you a great opportunity to add those things, but just be really cautious. Start small, keep it simple. I think that is like a trend that I've heard in several sessions today. So that is one thing we recommend there. You can have unique issue types at that level. So if you have, in my R&D world at my company, we call the level above epic deliverables. But I also have marketing using this extra layer, and deliverables don't make sense to them. They do campaigns. And so I have an issue type called campaign, and they both sit at that same level above epics, but it gives them the terminology that they need and that makes sense in their brain while still giving them that functionality of having sort of that roll up of an epic of epics. Okay, so it was a little bit about like setting up your plan, some of the advice that we recommend, and then some just things that you should have in place. Next, we kind of want to talk about actually planning your plan. How do you actually use this to do your quarterly planning or however long you're doing your planning session for?
So to begin with, you may be encountering sort of different levels of planning. And so how should you handle sort of a high level plan? Say you don't want to get into or haven't got to the point of estimating each individual story that teams are going to be working on. You just want to have a ballpark to determine what sort of larger initiatives and epics that you can tackle. So you can set up a plan that just includes those initiatives and those epics, that excludes all the story and subtask level, and then you can start putting ballpark estimates either in story points or in time to sort of give an initial ballpark as to how long a piece of work is likely to take. You do need to keep in mind that if you're using the same type of estimates, that you may need to remove those after you're done, so they don't end up getting double counted down the road. But you want to try and keep it simple, keep it high level, and that way it makes that sort of initial planning much easier.
So how do you plan out future sprints? So by default, advanced roadmaps will actually create projected sprints for you into the future. So this is one of the reasons, we'll circle back again, right? Using your agile board, your sprint board as your source, because then it can pull in that sprint information and you can use that to project out your work and sort of plan that out into the future. What we recommend is on your agile board, create your first sprint. You don't need to create anything more than that. Just create the first one. Put the dates in there for like, hey, our Q4 starts on October 1st, and then we do 2-week sprints, and so it's going to go to the 13th or 14th, however long 2-week sprints are. I can do math. And then what it does is it projects out those sprints for you and then fills your capacity for the quarter using those sprints. And whether you're using like a time estimate for those sprints or you're using story points for velocity, it recognizes how much you've estimated the work for, how much your team has capacity for, and then sort of pushes that and builds that all out for you, which is super nice. If for any reason you know that there's a sprint coming up within your quarter, that is going to be maybe a little bit less capacity because of holidays or time off, or maybe there's a week-long offsite that your whole team is going to, you can actually tweak the capacity sprint by sprint. Kind of takes a little bit of extra work, so kind of weigh like the effort versus the benefit there. It'll kind of give you a little bit of like saying, hey, this sprint's going to be a little bit less capacity, and you can kind of customize that, which is nice. The other thing we recommend, especially if you're not if you're doing really that high level planning and you're just bringing in epics and above, make sure that your team members are not actually adding epics and above to a sprint, because that's just going to throw things off for you, and it's just going to mess up with your data. And then as we get into like how auto scheduling and works at the later in the presentation, it just throws that off and throws off that data. So make sure you're directing your users not to add epics or anything higher to any sort of sprint. And then with the teams themselves, make sure that you are setting up the proper capacity. Make this a very clear directive to your leaders. Say, figure out what your capacity is, whether you're using time tracking story points, and make sure you enter that in there into the plan so that we are actually planning out the right amount of work, right? By default, it puts in like 200 weeks or 200 hours or something like that, right? And that's going to just throw things off. So make sure you're going in there and giving your teams directions to put that in there. And then make sure you're assigning the issue source so that it knows where to sort of pull that sprint information from. And that's why earlier Brendan recommended sort of like one agile board with one sprint and just bring everything in. And it's not actually used for your sprint planning. It's just used to sort of build this plan out. And so that's one of the reasons we kind of recommend that as well.
So one thing your stakeholders may ask for are milestones. Obviously, with large projects, you want to sort of see how your teams are doing over the course of the project, and not necessarily have a better idea of if you're going to be able to make your release date at regular intervals. Now, Advanced Roadmaps doesn't offer any specific item for or option for milestones, but you can use fixed versions / releases. Those two terms are more or less interchangeable to represent those. So you could create a particular milestone, set the start and end dates, and then Advanced Roadmaps, once you create that, it will align those dates across all the different projects. So if you're pulling issues from multiple projects, it'll create the fixed version in each of those projects with the set dates, and so everything is in alignment there. Obviously, the terms fixed version and releases are a bit loaded. They have a lot of connotations around them, so it does require a bit of education to sort of understand that these points in time don't represent necessarily code or going out to customers, and is just sort of a check-in point to establish when how a team is tracking overall. And another thing that I get asked for by stakeholders, particularly in the planning phase, is trying to represent some sort of like red line. When you're working out what teams can work on and what your various priorities on, there may be a lot of horse trading and sort of trying to determine what's in, what's out. And rather than removing issues from a plan and then adding them back, it can be very helpful to have this sort of like visualization of of what are below the line, and because of the way that Advanced Roadmaps is structured, this allows for any particular initiatives or epics or stories or whatnot to be dragged and dropped up and above this sort of this issue that you create that represents that sort of dividing line. You don't even need to necessarily check that issue into Jira. It can exist purely within the plan, but it's a good visual representation that helps understand what's being worked on there. So I think next in our agenda, once you've got your plan sort of put together, one of the big pieces is sharing it with your stakeholders.
So setting up plan views is very dynamic, and it's pretty cool how sort of the different feature sets that you could do here as far as just kind of who wants to see what and what do you want to see and why. When you build a plan, there are 4 default views that get created every single time. It's basically like your basic view, which kind of just has general information. There's a dependency view, which kind of shows you all of your things that you've linked correctly using is blocked by correct, right? Yeah. And then you have like your sprint view. This is really great when you're doing like capacity planning and you're wanting to see sort of things broken out by team and what that looks like for each team in the sprint. And so it kind of gives you these little basic views to start out with, but from there you can kind of customize and make however many views you want that make sense to you. And so this is sort of just a little bit of an example of what you can kind of see in that view. So you can see by filtering, I can filter different layers of the hierarchy. So maybe I only want to see things at the very highest level. Maybe I only want to see things at my epic level, or I want to see multiple layers that I've brought in. You can kind of make that determination. All of these system fields that we've recommended that you use are ways to filter as well. So you can filter by team or assignee or maybe project if you're bringing in multiple projects to see information. If you bring in custom fields that you've built out, you can also filter on custom fields. So this other sort of screenshot that I have here is our company uses RAG status, red, amber, green, right? And we have a custom field where we can set that RAG status for each item. And then what I do is I create a filter or a view that basically says, just show me the red and amber things. And then my project managers, my team leads, whoever is sort of fighting fires, maybe a scrum master kind of comes in and says, okay, what do I need to go tackle and unblock so that we can continue to make progress forward? And so it gives you a really kind of a great view there. And then you can also do color coding based off of the RAG status, which is super nice. So then you can kind of have, let me look at this real quick and, oh, the red catches my eye and you're great and good to go. So there's a lot that you can do here. Once you kind of figure out what you like as far as like the filters, how you want your color coding or your grouping to look. You can also decide which columns that you want to show and display. You can also decide what like date range, right? I want to see the quarter, I want to see a month. Once you make those determinations, you save that view. And if you share that out and you share that URL, you'll see there's a view ID in the URL. It'll send people exactly directly to that view. And when we get into sort of how you share out the plan later, this is going to be really critical that you know which views you have saved and which views that you're sharing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, one of the more dynamic means of setting up color schemes are labels. Say you get through a planning session with your stakeholders and they decide sort of off the cuff, can we break this up into like phase 1 and phase 2 and have a color representation for that? Well, you don't want to necessarily go in, create a brand new custom field and start sort of like assigning all your different issues to these fields. So what you can do is start tagging those particular issues with labels. And so these labels, they can represent themes, phases, particular features, whatever anybody can sort of dream up. You can quickly implement without having to add extra bulk to your custom fields. Do recommend sort of trying to keep ID codes fairly short or whatnot, but ultimately that's up to you. The labels do need to exist in at least one Jira issue before they start being able to be available within your advanced roadmap. So you need to keep that in mind, that it has to exist beforehand.
Okay, so as I teased, how do you actually share out your plan? So there are a few options for sharing out your plan. The first thing to know before you actually share is any share link that you send out is automatically going to be a read-only view. So even if I have access to edit it and I have access to kind of come into the plan and change things, if I access it through this link, it's always going to be a read-only view. And so I'm going to have to sort of navigate out and go back into a different view to sort of edit it if I need to edit it. But this is really great if you're sharing it with people who are like, please don't mess with this beautiful thing that I've just created, right? So it's really nice that you have just sort of this read-only option. So the options that you have is you can just send out a link, right? And here's your link in chat or Slack, whatever that looks like. You can embed it using an iframe. There is a Confluence macro both in data center and in cloud, and I would recommend using that instead of an embed if you're putting it in Confluence. If you have people who cannot let go of Excel and they just love Excel for all of the things, you can export this to a CSV and get that data in there as well. And then you can also just do basically an image PNG file export. This is great if you kind of want like a picture in time. Maybe you're sharing it externally with a client and you just kind of want to give them a screen grab sort of what the plan looks like. Make sure you're on the right view. So as I explained earlier, you can create all these different views and save them. Make sure you're on the view that you want to share before you create that share link. That's going to be really critical. Otherwise, it's going to send them to the wrong view. And then once you do like embed it onto like a Confluence page, you can kind of see in this screenshot, it does allow you a little bit of interaction. So it has a search bar, so I can search the plan. It has like a little legend, kind of explains everything. So if people aren't really familiar with advanced roadmaps, it gives them a little bit of a guide. And so if you are using sort of that Confluence macro, that's really helpful to sort of embed that view on the page. And then there's a little bit of what people can see. And it's also going to show you the live data in Confluence, which is super nice.
And another question that you may get asked is, how do I review past plans? And to a certain degree, you don't. The data is always live. It's always pulling from what is in your current Jira database. So it can infer what happened in the past, but based off of what things are there. So past information is available, but changes are not maintained. So we recommend taking screenshots at established milestones, and this gives you sort of a state of the plan to be preserved in time. This is really great for being able to refer back at quarterly retrospectives and see what your original plan is versus what your actual plan ended up being, and try and work with teams to understand lessons learned for any of the discrepancies.
So then the last really kind of thing we want to talk about in regards to displaying your plan is the use of scenarios in the auto schedule feature. So this is really great if you're looking at sort of, I want to understand what my best case scenario and worst case scenario is. So for my onboarding team at my company, they may have something that they know is going to take them a week of work internally, but they're not sure when the client's going to get them the information so they can actually start that week of work. So the client may get it to them within a week. The client may take 3 weeks, right? So they can kind of do this playing around and saying, hey, I'm going to create a second scenario. And I'm going to say, this is about the maximum amount of time that a client's going to get me something, or this task is going to take. And then they could do another one where it says, like, this is about the minimum amount of time. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of like, hey, we could finish this in a month, or this is going to take us 6 months. And these are sort of the factors that we need to be aware of. So it really gives you that sort of great sort of playground, because anything you do in advanced roadmaps stays in advanced roadmaps unless you push it to Jira. So it gives you just really this great opportunity to sort of play around and see what's going on there. You can either manually create these scenarios or using that auto schedule feature. So the way that we use it at my company is planning out capacity. So during our quarterly planning, before the quarter starts, this is where we're emphasizing that Jira hygiene again. Make sure your teams are on your issues. Make sure you have estimates, whether you're using story points or you're using time tracking. Make sure you have all that in there. And then you run this auto schedule feature, and it basically populates it all out and says, hey, this is where your teams are at right now. So in the screenshot, you can kind of see 3 teams. This top team is way under capacity. They have plenty of sprints that they can do until that milestone, which is the little red dot. And then you can see the next 2 teams are over capacity. We have one that's just a little bit over capacity, and then we have one where it's like, we don't even know how far that one's going out, right? And so we can easily say, hey, team, let's go back to your RICE scores. Let's figure out, what do we want to cut? What do we take out? Do we change scope? And this gives us really great data so that we can kind of determine how things go. And then teams tweak things. Maybe we give them a day or 2 to sort of make some changes, change estimates, capacity, scope, whatever that looks like. Let's run the auto schedule again. Let's see where we're at. Great, this team has added more things. This team has cut some stuff out. This team added more, and now they're over capacity. And so you can kind of get this good view and have a better idea going into the quarter of like, hey, where we're at and how comfortable are we with what we've planned. Make sure, pro tips, right? Make sure you have an estimate on all of that work. Otherwise, it's not going to be, it's not going to be factored in and basically planned out an auto schedule feature. If you don't have an estimate, it's basically like, oh, this takes no work. Cool. We're not going to plan it out for them. And then make sure everything is assigned to a team. If you have bad hygiene and you have something unassigned to a team, Jira goes, oh, this team is under capacity. Let's assign it to them. And that team might not be the right team to even do that work. It's not even their application or service that they're supporting. So we create like an unassigned team, and any like team that has bad hygiene and hasn't assigned anything yet, assign everything to this unassigned team so it doesn't accidentally get assigned to the wrong team. So that's sort of just some sort of advice that we have using the auto schedule feature. We use it all the time with quarterly planning, and it's been super nice for us to do that capacity piece. So I highly recommend using that. Okay, so some just general tips we want to just share and make sure that you guys are aware with. And what we're going to start out with is the good stuff. Oh, wait, no, sorry, the bad stuff.
Yeah. So it's not always sunshine and roses. I mean, we love the tool. It helps us tremendously, but there are a few things about it that little caveats that you need to be aware of, and some minor pain points that your team members need to be made aware of. First things first, if you're missing data, it makes things very difficult. People will be wondering where particular issues are. So you need to be very clear about what the rules are for gathering things in. If they're try and keep it as simple as either setting a particular fixed version or some other custom field, so that everybody knows that if an issue is set properly, it will get scooped into your plan. Erica was just talking about the auto scheduler. Use it at your discretion. It is a automated tool. It is a automated process. It does not know your work the way you know it. It doesn't know that this particular team is particularly good at UI work, or that this team has experience in more back-end type stuff. So it'll just schedule things based on sort of who's available and whatnot. So use it at your discretion. If you don't order by rank, the drag and drop feature basically shuts down, and there isn't a great indicator that you've changed the ordering. I get occasional questions from my product team saying the tool is broken, and it just turns out that they switched the ordering, and so consequently it's not able to drag and drop. So make sure you keep that ordering by rank and let people know that that's what's required. As Erica mentioned, the shared views are read-only. That's even if you share a particular view. If you use the share view button to share with somebody who has editing privileges, they'll just get a read-only view. So be mindful of that and use the right link or share depending on what you want. External visibility to plans, not available outside your own private instance. If they don't have access to the instance, they won't have access to the plan. So CSV or screenshots are your friend if you need to share things externally. And we won't get too much into it, but basically Advanced Roadmaps does have its own separate permissions that need to be granted. So it's not like boards or dashboards where if you can see the project, you can see the plan. You need to grant yet additional privileges to your users, to your editors, to make sure that they have the right level of permissions to get in there and do the necessary work.
Okay, so what processes help outside of advanced roadmaps? So I'm gonna be a fangirl and drop a quote here. A fool with a tool is still a fool, says who? Dom Price, the work futurist at Atlassian. I love this quote because so much of what I preach at my work is, listen, it is people, process, then tools, right? If you don't have the right people in place, you don't have the right process in place, a tool is not going to solve your problems. So it's really important to have sort of good processes set up outside of advanced roadmaps. So one thing that I like to start out with is assign one person to really just lead, organize, delegate your quarterly planning, or however long you're planning your sort of timeline for. Let them be sort of in charge of saying, hey, here are the deadlines. Hey, we're coming up on quarterly planning. Here's the tasks that you need to get done. Really having sort of one key contact. And then that person, everybody knows to go to that person. For us, it's somebody in our PMO office that really runs it. And then everything goes through him. If he has a Jira issue, then he can come to me and I can help sort of troubleshoot and figure out what's going on there. But it's really just sort of helps to have one person sort of in charge of all of that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, really set up some sort of prioritization framework. For us, we use RICE, which is that reach, impact, and confidence divided by effort. It is a pretty industry standard-wide sort of prioritization method. If you just Google RICE prioritization, you'll find a lot of information about how to use that. And it's been really useful for us, especially when we get into those capacity concerns and saying, like, this team has got too much work. It is just one data point. There may be a lot of other things that we have to factor in. Like, yeah, this has a low RICE score, but like, we have to get this done, right? And yeah, it's only for one client, but it's a critical client. There's a lot of things to factor in, but it's just another data point that you can kind of use. So I really recommend having some sort of way that you're going to say this needs to be done before this, right? Give your team members really clear instructions, especially if you're just starting out using the tool. It can be a little bit overwhelming for end users about like, where do I put what data? I edited something in advanced roadmaps. Why isn't it showing in my Jira issue? You're really making sure that they kind of understand the steps that they need to take. So we built out a Confluence calendar that says, hey, it's quarterly planning, starts here. The end of this week, you need to have your items identified. Basically, get your stuff in Jira. You need Jira issues, right? And get the fields filled out, right? That's sort of step one. The next step is, hey, make sure your team capacity is updated, and make sure we have that data and that information. Make sure your work is estimated is sort of the next step, right? So just giving them like, hey, let's get these things done in this cadence really helps them out because they're doing their job at the same time as quarterly planning, right? Like it doesn't like work stops. It's like, oh, we're quarterly planning. Let's not do anything besides quarterly planning, right? So it really gives them the opportunity to sort of be like, this is what I need to get done this week along with my day job. Use dashboards, right? So you can kind of see in the screenshot, we have a dashboard that we've created that really helps not only during quarterly planning, we have like a whole missing items dashboard that really helps us with a hygiene piece, but then throughout the quarter as well, like where are things at? How many things do we have tied to which initiative? What does the status look like? Maybe I want to look in the middle of the quarter and be like, hey, we have a lot that's not been started and we're mid-quarter. So using the Jira dashboard functionality is super useful just to get a little bit better data around reporting. And then be agile, conduct those retros, iterate, improve. As I mentioned 2 years ago, we were in Excel planning this stuff. And it was basically feedback from a retro after planning that was like, why aren't we planning in the tool that we're doing the work in? And we did this huge effort to say, we're getting rid of Excel. Let's push into advanced roadmaps. So that is something just to really think about. Get that feedback every single time. Get it right away, right? So it's fresh in people's minds of saying like, hey, this went really well. Let's keep doing that. This was a little bit janky and didn't work great. How can we improve that for next quarter? So really make sure you're getting that feedback and being agile, even with this quarterly planning process. We do want to call out just some differences. It looks like based off the poll, it sounds like most of us are in the cloud realm, but we just want to call out a few things if some of you are still in data center server or thinking about migrating. So the first this is maybe should have gone in the like what doesn't work well slide. The team field doesn't pull into dashboards on cloud. It's so super bummer. You can't really pull it into like issue statistics or pie charts. So you can't really build super great reporting off of that, which is really unfortunate. So you kind of get a little bit of that data through like advanced roadmaps and things like that. If you're on cloud, you should have a new pretty little left-hand panel now. So that's a little bit different from data center, is the navigation's really over in the left-hand panel. They're trying to kind of create this consistent UI experience when you're on boards or projects, you have that left panel menu. So they're doing the same thing in advanced roadmaps. And then this last bullet point is specifically if you just have the script runner add-on. So this was a little bit of a pain point for us when we migrated to cloud. We were using script runner on data center, and the JQL issue function in portfolio children of was like how we powered all of the things. And it was really useful because in the brackets, we could basically write another JQL string and really find sort of the child issues that we really wanted to see based off of a theme or initiative or maybe a specific team. And it was really useful for us. That JQL query is not available in cloud at this time. Now, Adaptivist has an open request for it. Go out and upvote it. They're asking for feedback on it right now. I just saw a post a couple weeks ago where they're like, hey, we're looking into this. So that's super exciting. There is another add-on out there called JQL Search Extensions, which does provide this functionality if you need it kind of right away. And it does provide you a bunch more JQL Search Extensions also, which is super nice. And then the native JQL functionality is basically portfolio child issues of where you can just kind of put one key in there. So it's, key -123, and then you see all the child issues of that. So you still have a little bit of a way to sort of get that information. It's just a little bit more complicated, unfortunately, than it was for us in data center.
And as Erica was saying, that loss of that script runner functionality hit us as well. We were using a lot of it to sort of determine issues that belong to particular initiatives that map to a certain criteria. And so what we found, or rather, since this is no longer accessible to us, is to try to pass information around using automation rules. So if you're on Cloud Premium or Cloud Enterprise, you already have this as well. So it's something that you can look into. So automation can be built out fairly easily to pass data if a field changes in a parent, to pass it down to the child, or vice versa. So we use this for passing information up and down the hierarchy. We also have a set of automations that map the team field to another custom field for those instances where we just can't quite we need to display which team is assigned to a particular issue, but the team field isn't quite there yet. Hopefully we can retire that at some point. And you can set up triggers to establish a particular change in status, sort of when an issue has met certain criteria. You can flag that's ready for planning. Or in the case of RAG status automation, you can flag when an issue is going off track, or raise that RAG status sort of up through the hierarchy if a couple stories start flagging amber or red, then your parent issues can be updated to reflect that. And I think that's everything that we have to cover here. Lots of great questions in the Q&A. We will try and get to those in just a second, but I just wanted to, again, as Erica led with this, thank you very much to Trundle for allowing us to present to you these days. Eric and I met through the Atlassian community, and that is a really great place to get information and hear about how other people are using this. We're both Atlassian community event leaders, and recommend that you hop on to ace.atlassian.com, see if there is an ACE events near you, because we're always looking for support. And we'll try and get through as many questions as we can in the 10 minutes we have, but we will hop over to the Agile and DevOps room after this session and chat for a little bit with whoever's interested. So thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll kind of jump into some of the questions that we have here. So let's see what we got for most voted. If it is going to work. It's not going to work. Okay, so it looks like Craig asked a question here. Can you mix Kanban and Scrum using different sources? regarding a board and a filter. So you can have different sources for your plan. So you can have a board, you can have an entire project and bring in a whole project, or you can use a specific sort of built out filter. And you can use all three of those in one plan if you want to. We just really recommend using a board as a source and potentially just one board as a source, because we've just found that better for planning out capacity, and just making sure that we're really only bringing in the issues that we want to see. I think I saw another question from Jimmy about if we've hit the limit of the 5,000 issues. I have not hit that limit yet. I don't know if
I
Brendan
I,
has.
I have, yes. So
Go
and
for
I
it.
can talk to that a little bit. We had a couple of teams that had particularly large backlogs, and so scooping up absolutely everything on their boards meant we hit in, we started to hit some of that performance issues. I don't know if we actually hit 5,000, but we were up there. So we set some ground rules as in terms of what we wanted to see within a particular plan. So usually we either have a particular fixed version that is, that all the issues that we are working towards a particular quarterly release needs to be assigned to. We also have some other custom fields that can sort of determine whether it's part of a particular quarter or set of quarters, just to try and trim down what gets included in the plan. Because I mean, ultimately, if you start just piling everything on, the plan becomes unmanageable. You want to sort of slice it down. So we usually have we've built a plan that sort of auto updates every quarter. Just through how it's structured, but you can also build like individual plans for certain milestones depending on your needs. Right.
All right. The next question that we have, what is the impact on child-parent issue relationships if a new level within the issue hierarchy is added between two existing levels? Have you experienced this yet,
I
Brendan?
don't think I've ever attempted that. I would guess it would at very least warn you that this was going to happen, and because ultimately, yes, the parent, the child parent link would need to be broken there if you're inserting a new level of hierarchy in between there. So I'd expect that you'd have to do a chunk of manual migration. I don't
Yep.
think there's any sort of automated scheme, but I honestly have never tried that. So
Yeah, so for my company, we didn't insert anything new, but we did change, right? So as I mentioned, we started with 3 levels above an epic. We had feature, deliverable, and then capability. And we decided to remove feature and capability and just keep deliverable. And it broke all of the links. And so there definitely was a lot of hygiene that we kind of had to go through. It did provide like a little yellow warning if it was linked to an incorrect parent. So you knew you kind of had to go through and fix it. You could do some bulk sort of moving ahead of time a little bit, but not much. So it was a little bit of a pain in the process. And that's why it's like, really think through when you're adding levels what makes the most sense. And you can add multiple issue types at the different levels. So like really think through of like, do I need another level or do I just need a custom issue type for this unique sort of situation? So it may have improved since then. It was a while back that we removed those extra layers, but it was definitely sort of a pain in the process. So definitely think through before you're jumping into that.
I think the next question, I'm not sure if it falls under purview, but can you ask Atlassian if we can delete labels? Yeah, no, there is no easy way to delete labels. I think what you could do, um, depending on how many issues you have for a particular label, is go through, set up a JQL query looking for that label, do a bulk update, and specifically target that label and remove it. And once it doesn't exist on any issues, it effectively disappears. It's no longer sort of offered up as a listing there. So that's what I would do to get around that.
All right. So the next question, does it have working dates option, a way to do blanket days worked? I think your question is in regards to sort of like the time tracking feature and saying, hey, we estimated this to be, 5 days of work and 3 days have been accomplished. I think that's what your question is. And then if so, if you use that time tracking feature within Jira that's sort of built in already, it will capture that data and pull that into the plan. So it knows like, hey, we've estimated it at this level of work and we've accomplished this much so far. And so that information should get pulled through for you.
Next question, will they eventually add feature issue types? Well, I mean, that's the great thing about being able to configure the hierarchy levels through advanced roadmaps is that you don't have to necessarily wait for Atlassian to roll that out. You can add that, as your top hierarchy, and all your epics can belong to a particular feature issue type. You may even want to have it in a separate project from everything else, and so that's the project where all the features are stored. So.
And I will say, if you are in cloud, this is rolling out right now. So you may have this functionality already, you may not, but they are rolling out the ability to rename the epic level. And so instead of having an epic panel, it can be a feature panel on your Scrum board. The thing to think about though is it renames it for your entire instance. So if you have one team who's like, I don't like the word epic, it doesn't make sense, you can't really say, okay, I'll change it for you. You'll change it for everybody. And we've kind of made the decision of like, that's just going to cause way more confusion than be helpful. So if you have maybe a new instance and you guys are just new to Jira, cool, great, start out with that, right? And just rename that level and say this level is called feature, and you can have epics at that level and maybe another custom issue type of feature as well. But just something to think about there with that. Let's see. So how do we differentiate between tasks and subtasks when associating with the stories and epics?
So it'll show you the levels of hierarchy. So subtasks will be displayed sort of under regular tasks or issues at that level. Again, you can customize the hierarchy as tall as you like. We do recommend, limiting that because it can get quite unruly if you're not too careful. But it does a good job it does a really good job of showing the hierarchy within the advanced roadmaps.
All right, this is going to be one for each of us here. What would you like to see added, improved on advanced roadmaps?
I mean, there's a number of things. Sort of being able to track changes a little more would be nice, but I think that's a fairly large undertaking. So I would go with just simply being able to have like that red line that I was showing earlier. If we didn't have to sort of like kludge it a little bit, but if you could have specific groupings of issues that you could drag and drop between, I think that would greatly help the stakeholders in sort of understanding and grouping things in a useful manner.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be the JQL that I mentioned earlier. That JQL is just, it was very, very useful. It was really helpful for building out reports. And so for me, I think that would be sort of my number one feature. It would be great if it was also just sort of built into the system and I didn't have to have like a script runner add-on. But that is sort of what I would recommend there. And then Vicky, we're getting a little feedback, I think, from your mic.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to pop in and give you your 2-minute warning, and it's making it worse. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay.
Yeah, so we are at the end. So really, once again, I want to thank you guys so much for attending. I published the poll results, and the correct answer is that it is pronounced Boise. Yeah, so that is, I am from Boise, Idaho, and the milkshake story. It comes from this question. We had the wonderful Chris Cook from Tempo Now, and he did not know how to pronounce it, and he was very excited about a co-hosted event we were doing with the Atlassian community, showing the Atlassian community it's awesome, and he thought it was pronounced Boise, like boy, like noise. And so it was, yes, Erica brings all of the boys to the yard, right? Because boys, yeah. And so that is where Milkshake came from, is that, and Boyce brings the noise, all of those sorts of things. So that is the Milkshake story. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to share. Please reach out on Atlassian community, come attend events. They're so fun. It's a great group. We have a blast together and we learn so much and really support each other. So really thank you guys so much for attending. And we will be in the DevOps Agile room for a little while after this session. So if you do have more questions or we didn't answer your question, please join us there.
Thank you so much.